Hi everyone, Erica here with Fibers and Floss Canada. Today I'm coming to you with the very first Flosstubeversity. The plan of this is to have a less than 10-minute episode where you learn something new about your craft. Today we're going to be talking about the selvage edges in our material and whether or not that actually makes a difference in the orientation of our project. So Samantha and I were stitching together last week, and the conversation came up that we had always been told when you stitch, make sure your selvage edge is running to the left of your pattern. And whether or not that actually plays an important role was the question, because even though we've heard that it needs to be to the left of your work, neither of us were really sure why. I looked online as well to see if I could find a straight, simple answer, and everything I read was that A, this is controversial, but B, there's really next to no rationale or controversy that I could find, even though it said it was controversial. So I don't know. What I did find, though, I thought I would share with you guys so that you could hopefully learn a little something and become a bit of a stronger stitcher. So first off, with respect to linens, we need to understand how the weaving process happens. And when we are weaving something, we weave something on a bolt of fabric. So we end up with a very, it might be a yard or 2 yards wide by like 50 or 100 or 120 yards long. And when we're making that fabric, what happens is it gets set up on a loom, and the weaver will set up their warp, and their warp is the lines of linen that run up and down away from the weaver, and it's going to go the whole length of that bolt of fabric. That is the warp side. That's commonly known as our cut side, not our selvage side. On the other side, the edges of that bolt of fabric that runs all the way down, that is going to be our selvage edge. And usually we can identify that quite easily. If I look at a couple samples that I have here, this is a common sample here where that is our selvage edge, where you can tell it does not fray, it does not become unravel. It is what they call a self-finished edge, as opposed to our cut edge, which of course can fray and unravel on us. Now, sometimes we can identify that line quite easily. We can have the blue line that is identifiable. We can have, where I had it here, we have an orange line. Certain companies are known for their certain colors, right? Other times we have lines that are a bit more hidden, like this here. This is a Weeks Dye Works, and it is a self-finished non-fraying edge, but it's not that easily identifiable when you look without taking a close look. Other times we do end up with fabric as well that has absolutely no identifiable selvage. This is a smaller piece of Platinum Newcastle I bought for Christmas ornaments, and it's lovely. It's serged all the way around the edges, but I have no idea what side is the selvage side. So when we talk about the weaving process, and we do have our warp, and the warp is, that end is really taut. It's nice and tight. There is no stretch, there is no give. But when a weaver is weaving their linen in this example, from left to right, back and forth, they go all the way down the length of this bolt. When they do that, that fiber is going up a thread of the warp and down and up and down and up and down. And as it does that, you end up with more fiber going across the side from selvage to selvage. And so for that reason, you end up with some stretch from selvage to selvage, whereas the cut side that goes along the length does not have any stretch at all. It's nice and tight. And so the question is that important for us in cross stitch? And to go back in the history there, there's 2 times that's important. One is if you're doing a method called the drawn thread method. And so for that, I relate that more to what appears to be like a hardanger sort of look, where you're actually going in and you're snipping threads and you're pulling and removing those threads, and it creates a hole. And that was what we called, it was early lace work. And so if you're interested in learning more about drawn thread method, you can go to Royal School of Needlework online. It's a free resource, and they do have tutorials and a whole section on drawn thread. If you are doing drawn thread, then yes, it is really, really important that the orientation, that you want to have your selvage ends be at the top or at the bottom of your work, because your thread is being pulled from left to right, and they don't want you to pull where there's any stretch, because if you pull where there's stretch, that the whole fabric's going to pucker a little bit and pucker permanently. Drawn thread's actually a really difficult craft to do well. And so in drawn thread, yes, the selvage edge, top or the bottom. For embroidery, cross stitch, harding, or needlework, it actually doesn't matter where your selvage edge goes. It can go on the right or the left. It can go on the top or the bottom. It does not matter. What I did find I thought was very interesting was multiple resources actually recommend that you cut off that selvage edge prior to any cross stitch whatsoever. And the rationale is that when you're cross stitching, you're making an X, which is a nice, strong, stable X. There should be even tension from all 4 points. And as long as you're not doing 10th stitch or half stitch, you're doing full cross stitches for the majority of your work. You do want to have even movement throughout all of your linen. And in order to do that, you have to cut off that selvage edge, because the selvage edge does cause some restriction in movement on that side. So if you want to have nice work that flows well, that lays well, and doesn't appear to be kind of pulled on the one side, you do want to cut that selvage edge right off, then serge your edges, then you can start cross stitching. Yeah, so hopefully you guys have learned something there you didn't know before. Now, the only other time that you do want to make sure your fabric has the right orientation is if you are stitching, and yes, cross stitching, something that will be displayed with a bell pull. So a bell pull is when you have, your cross stitch piece, and then you have a weight here, usually something metal, and then you have something at the top that it hangs from, and essentially the fabric ends up just hanging on the wall like this. Because of the tension with the tension and the weight, you do want to make sure that your threads that go with the warp are going up and down, so you don't have any stretch over time. That is the only other time it is important to know where the orientation of your fabric lies. And for that, if you do not have an easily identifiable selvage edge, what you can do is take your fabric and see which edge actually does have some give. So when I'm pulling here, okay, I don't feel any give at all. When I pull here, I've got a little bit of give. And I don't know that you guys can really see that on camera. It's hard to see. And also the finer the count, the less give you're going to have. So you do need to know where your give is. And when you do pull on that fabric, if there's a give, that is your selvage edge because of the weaving up and down. If you pull hard and there's no give at all, it's just nice and firm, that is your weft edge, the nice taut original fiber that is being woven through. And I hope that is informational for you guys. I hope you enjoyed your first episode of Flosstubeversity. I hope you will join us again soon. Until then, happy stitching.